Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about client surveys. You can think of client surveys as being part of one of the groups, categories of all client feedback. And you can divide all client feedback into three major groups. So the first one is what clients think, the second is what clients say, and the third one is how clients act. So the surveys, all the written surveys where when clients add a rating or when they agree or disagree with the statement, these fall under the category of thinking, or what clients think. Then the second category, what clients say, these would be like phone interviews, face-to-face interviews, roundtables, etc. Right? Everything where clients say something to your professionals or to their peers, etc. And then there's the third kind of feedback mechanism. It's behavioral assessment, right? How clients act. The way you gather that feedback is by having conversations with your professionals about the behaviors the clients had when interacting with professionals. For example, what were the trade-offs when trade-offs presented themselves? What did clients choose? What words did they use? How they reacted, their emotions, etc. Right? So these are the three broad categories. Now, I wanted to talk about client surveys. So these fall into the first category of what clients think. First of all, it is really important to understand that these surveys, these are not only a way to gauge the market, right, to gather market intelligence, but it's also a managerial mechanism. So you can use those surveys to analyze what needs to be improved at your firm. So it's really important to create your surveys in a manner that would measure strategic matters, right? Matters that will matter for your firm to get a competitive advantage in the marketplace. For example, you might be familiar with NPS, Net Promoter Score kind of survey. It only asks one question: how likely are you to recommend us to your friends, colleagues, etc.? And then also sometimes there is the follow-up question: what can we do to improve? The problem with this kind of survey, it doesn't provide you with enough actionable data once you receive that information. The second problem with this is that it's more about your interests, rather than clients' interests. The third issue with that is that you cannot really know what you need to improve strategically at your firm. For example, if you want to build a real team, so you want to assess through those surveys how great your professionals are with teamwork. And if you don't ask that question, Net Promoter's survey doesn't provide you with that answer, obviously. But if you don't ask that question, if you don't pose a question to the client, you will never know whether you're doing good or you're failing with this measurement. Or for example, if you're interested in responsiveness, so for example, it is really important for your clients, you know that for sure that responsiveness is crucial for them. Maybe it's the kind of service that they're anticipating from you. If you don't ask them a question, how responsive our professionals were, then you will never know whether you're doing good or you're failing at this measurement. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is, what are you actually going to do with those measures that you measure in those surveys? So the survey is a great management mechanism. Once you get the information of where you're failing, then you will be able to know what you need to improve. But also it's a sort of a conscience mechanism for your professionals, because once they know what you're measuring, and of course you should also build a system where you would reward certain behaviors and reprimand certain activities. Once your professionals know that you are actually measuring certain areas of strategic importance, they will adjust their behaviors. Well, they will try to do their best to adjust their behaviors. I mean, normal professionals would do that. So the power of those surveys rests not only with gathering the actual data, like taking the temperature of the market, but also with creating like a conscious mechanism for your professionals. And this way you can improve drastically in comparison to other firms. Obviously, for those reasons, it is quite important to create custom surveys rather than just taking bulk mass market kind of surveys, because they do not focus on strategic areas of your firm. And your firm can only be able to create or attain a competitive advantage once you focus on matters that are strategically important for your firm. And that strategy would also often be different from your competitor's strategy, right? So it is quite important for you to figure out which measures you want to include in your surveys. And surveys shouldn't have like 100 questions, but it shouldn't be just 2 questions either. Then include those measurements into your survey. And then you want to make sure that you will actually act on the feedback that you're going to get, right? Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense to include those. For example, if you're measuring teamwork, if you're asking a question in the survey, how good were we with teamwork and collaboration, but then at your firm, you're actually rewarding your professionals for individual performance, right? So you prioritize individualism, then it really doesn't make sense to measure teamwork, okay? And vice versa, of course. There's like a 3-step system here. First, you have to understand what you really want to measure. Like, we really want to know where we're failing, and you should point out those areas that you want to know and you want to improve. Then you add those. Then you formulate questions and you add those questions to the survey, but then you make a commitment to act on those, on the client feedback with regard to each of those statements. Now, there is another important thing to remember, is that what your clients think, what they say and what they do sometimes are misaligned. So that should be kept in mind. Therefore, it is best if you can come up with a way to triangulate the responses. So if you're measuring teamwork, for instance, it is best to issue a written survey, right? So that the clients can respond what they think. Then you would want to have an interview or any other type of survey or feedback that falls under the what they say group. So it can be an interview over the phone, for example, or during a roundtable, and you would want to formulate a similar question and ask your clients that question during those interviews, face-to-face interactions. And you would also want to ask your professionals about the behavior of the client. So they would confirm that none of the other responses contradict the behavior of the buyer. And the last thing I wanted to say is that you should administer those surveys yourselves, especially those that require face-to-face interactions. It is quite important for you to build a relationship with the client. The client has to know and understand that you really care about their business. And the only way to do it is you have to show, don't tell, right? The proclamations on your website or in an email doesn't mean much unless you actually do something. And therefore, you need to provide evidence that you actually care about your clients. And one of the ways how to do it is through the surveys. Like the questions you ask and the questions you don't ask tell quite a lot, right? So whenever you're creating a survey, and let's say it has 20 or 25 questions that you don't ask but matter to clients also tell a story that, hey, well, you don't really care about our opinion on those other matters, which are quite important for us, right? And that tells us a lot about what kind of service provider you are. So in a sense, you would, before creating a survey, you would want to talk to your clients about what matters to them, right? And of course, those surveys will be essentially a creation of those surveys will be an iterative progress, because client needs change and your client base changes, etc. Right? So it's not like one and done thing. And like I said, you shouldn't rely on mass market kind of surveys. There are good ones, of course, but because this client feedback mechanism allows you to create competitive advantage, therefore you need to include those strategic questions. Therefore, the only way to do it is to create custom surveys for yourself. Well, that's it. See you in the next video.